So the biggest promises of the last decade of heavy music, what I'm referring to is top metal albums or top metal album debuts of the previous decade. So the last 10 years marked a shift in the music industry with a swift exit from the scene for rock and metal music, in the mainstream that is. After the successive booms of new metal, pop punk, post-punk revival in the initial decade of the new century, the domination of the digital age and slow reaction by the rock and metal business, together with the normal interest or fluctuations of every new generation, whilst a decline in the presence of guitar heavy artists in the popular corners of the business. Of course, this led to the immediate proclamation of the death of rock and metal, and new bands were blamed for not having the same quality as their predecessors to the face the heavyweight influence of hip-hop or EDM artists flooding the charts and dominating the popular movements. But calm down, the truth is that they couldn't be more wrong, as the heavy scene has never been more alive and more diverse. And just because it's a niche phenomenon, it does not take away from any of the merits of its recent releases. And therefore, to fight the gloominess that this year in particular has brought us, let's have a blast from the recent past and put forth the best album debuts in the metal genre in the last 10 years. Molded by the hardcore aesthetic, this UK band led by the powerhouse Justine Jones showed the promise from the start, with their powerful debut album Greater Than You Remember being an assault to all senses and a lesson in aggression, with riffs that bring down the house in the explosive live shows. Their follow-ups, The Wolf of a Dying Sun and The Eternal Forward Motion, saw them embrace further their alternative metal influences and a balance of heavy and clean sections with masterful precision, making them a band to keep in mind when discussing the future of metal. A supergroup made out of some of the elite players from American metal pioneers, Mutoid Man initially served as a side project for Cave-In frontman Stephen Brodsky's recruiting Converge's drummer Ben Kola and bassist Nick Kageo to form a power trio that deserves their accolades in their own right. That Mastodon did the previous decade by fusing southern-drenched sludgy influences and the masterfully crafted prog metal. Mutoid Man combines the cerebral approach of their members' main projects with no F's given swagger of the Thin Lizzy influenced hard rock. The result is unashamedly a fun affair, with the musicians having the time of their lives while dropping some outstanding riffage with just enough embracing musicianship to never let things get too by the numbers. Their debut, Bleeder, was a massive record that hit hard in all the right places, and 2017's Hormones presented a never boring formula that shows that you can never run out of ideas for a fresh approach to good old rock and roll. Born in 2009 in Donetsk, Ukraine, Jinjer became an international sensation with their genre-bending approach to metal. Led by vocal chameleon Tatiana Shmailuk, the band is not afraid to brag their wide-away influences that go from Gojira to Cypress Hill. Although their global recognition came later, with the massive dual release Macro and Micro in 2019, the group started to gather a sizable following since their debut album Cloud Factory, where the vocal acrobatics of their singer accompanied the band through Lamb of God inspired groove metal with riffs until prog territory worthy of Opus. For a band this versatile, it could be a mistake to wear their influences too much on their sleeve, but Jinjer managed to embed their sound with an identity that is starting to be recognized as a proper phenomenon. Arkansas natives Pallbearer are already hailed as one of the most exciting bands to emerge from the more popular than ever doom metal scene. As much as they are yet to make one critical mishap, their rise to the niche stardom began with their debut Sorrow and Extinction. With only 5 tracks but clocking in at an impressive 49 minutes, it would be easy for the record to sound bloated or endlessly monotonous, but somehow every note seems to be in place and there is not 1 second wasted. The band channels the mandatory Black Sabbath influences, but goes much more beyond the constraints of the genre, borrowing elements that range from Stoner Giant Sleep to post-rock claustrophobia reminiscent of Russian circles. With extraordinary riffs piled on each other and hooks for days, there is always something to grab your attention, an impressive feat in an album where the shortest songs reach the 8-minute mark. It's hard nowadays to find albums that make for such rewarding journeys without getting lost on the way. Blending African-American influences rooted in the traditional soul and blues, Ganu turns all expectations on their heads as he merges with them with black metal blast beats and jaw-dropping riffs, all while keeping a low-fi aspect fitting to the movement. On paper it seems like a mix that would never ever work, but only seeing the soul-dripping vocals ends up merging perfectly with the blast beats and down-tuning riffage put on in the record, and the result is a wall-punching heavy effort that still has notable sing-along quality. The project continued with their success with a sophomore album, Stranger Fruit, and is set to conquer the heavy metal world as one of the most exciting and unexpected projects of the decade. Simultaneously one of the most acclaimed bands by the mainstream in metal today, and a completely polarizing group in the heavy scene, Code Orange are one of the few new bands that brings to mind the kind of opinions great groups elicited in the past. Although their explosion with the sophomore album Iron King and continue with all releases since, the debut effort, still under the name Code Orange Kids, is still already an excellent introduction to the band that leaves no one indifferent. Merging their hardcore punk roots with no-nonsense metalcore and a surplus of industrial influences that bring to mind Trent Reznor in these darkest days, Code Orange's approach to songwriting is a standout in the genre, with dual male-to-female vocals, harsh or otherwise, and the dynamics between powerful breakdowns and melodic interludes make for an exciting listen that would be perfected later on, but has a rawer edge, not without its charm on this album. Whether you believe they are the saviours of the metal scene or scoff at their undeniable self-appointed arrogance as a leading men of the genre, it is clear that Code Orange are one of the precious few new artists still capable of leaving an indelible mark on anybody's mind. American outfit, Periphery seems like one of the most obvious names whenever the topic of modern metal bands making exciting and yet unbelievably catchy music comes up. But even before they were even an established act we find today, they were already shaping the face of metal for decades to come. In a time where gent-influenced riffs were taking their first steps in the prog and metalcore scenes, Periphery took advantage of an incredible musicianship of their members to create a mix of heavy bottom-end riffs in an odd tempo first that advantage of they still left the room for melody to breathe. Thus, they created a unique sound that was not really prog and not really gent, and came to define how most invented metal will sound for years to come. Although often criticised for last-minute addition Spencer Sotellio's vocals, the self-titled debut still holds up incredibly well 10 years later, and it's impossible not to marvel at the perfectly crafted balance between aggression and hooks. When looking at a metal release from nowadays, chances are there are more than a few elements from this record are borrowed, and that credit is always due to Periphery. With a couple of EPs already in their pocket, and market as the female-fronted Dillinger Escape Plans, the Marmozets would not feature in this video if they remained in this route for long. Hooks aside, the British band's early efforts are not enough to set them apart from an overpopulated pack that was hoping to recreate Ben Wyman's mathematically precise riffs. However, when writing their debut effort, the band decided to dilute their sound with all the influences they could think of, which included the rhythms going away from metal, with the likes of Biffy Clyro, the emotional urgency of Paramore, and the large-scale songwritings of Muse. The result, combined with their previously metal-rooted sound, is an unapologetically fun listen that demands as much headbanging as hip-shaking and completely tears away at any borders heavy music might have set itself in. The musicianship is incredibly tight and over a slick production, accessible enough to fall on the mainstream ears, and although the lyrics are lacking like an immaturity. This record introduced us to the voice of Becca McIntyre, a force of nature capable of challenging the fragility of Beth Gibbons and the ferocity of Courtney Love in a matter of seconds. It's difficult to think of a time before Deafheaven's Sunbather came and just changed the entire black metal landscape with its mix of unforgiving blast beats and ethereal shoegaze influences. A new term was coined, black gaze. One of the metal's most extreme niches has started to peak at the mainstream as well. However, before the big explosion, there was a catalyst, and Roasted Judah might often get overlooked due to its younger sibling's massive power, but it should by no means be forgotten. An epic journey of 4 songs clocking in at the 40-minute mark, it's an album that rewards repeated listens with an emotionally chaotic ride, going from brooding slow tempos to frenetically paced shrieks and everything in between. A landmark release in its own right, Roasted Judah paved the way for black gaze explosion of the 2010s and still makes for a heartbreaking but ultimately powerful listen. And to end out this video, and also the Successive band in their inception, Ghost are arguably the only band to emerge in the last 10 years capable of reclaiming a spot with an older, more seasoned male royalty in terms of success and mainstream reach. The voice of Swedish frontman and mastermind Tobias Forge might not be for everybody, but the way his band made grand scale theatrics look cool again, the likes of which we hadn't even seen since the days of Alice Cooper, Misfits or The Cure, is to be acclaimed. More than a musical outfit, Ghost are dedicated to their horror-inspired storytelling, with each of their central characters' incarnations marking new chapters in the band's folklore that the fans follow and theorize about with devotion. But this would all be for nothing if the music wouldn't hold up. And the truth is, Opus Eponymous might wear its influences too often on its sleeves, but the sheer catching us to the 80s heavy metal root riffs is undeniable. Couple that with unforgettable melodies and a charismatic frontman, and Ghost might just be that band to change the tide for mainstream heavy music in the near future, as they already proved with their following successes leading up to 2018's Prequel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.